The Book of Genesis Part 22. The Book of Genesis Part 22. James Gunn. In our studies, we are now ready to begin an examination into the life of the patriarch Abraham, and it is only proper that we commence with his past. In the history of Abraham, the descendant of Shem, the son of Noah, there lay, as we have seen, two of the most important epochs in the entire history of the human race, namely, the Deluge and the Tower of Babel. To the men of that time, to Abraham, the first should have spoken of grace and the second of guilt. Grace provided an ark of salvation from the deluge, but guilt raised a tower in renewed rebellion against God. The first of these spoke of salvation in the midst of judgment, while the second spoke of condemnation in the midst of sacrilege. Throughout the whole of human history, God has endeavored to impress these two things upon the descendants of Adam. In Eden, he emphasized guilt by the curse and grace by the provision through death of garments for Adam and Eve. In the story of Cain, he impresses us with the story of guilt, while in that of Abel, it is grace. Later on, these two factors were taught Israel in Egypt, in the 10 plagues, guilt, and in the Passover, grace. Let us now look at Abraham in his pre-conversion stage. Abraham was a native of Ur of the Chaldees, and from Jos 24:2-15 we learned that he lived in moral and spiritual darkness. Abraham was a polytheist, a worshipper of many gods. In spite of the repeated manifestations of guilt and grace in the annals of human history, the mind of man was blinded by the God of this world. 2 Corinthians 4:3-4. Let us now consider in the life of Abraham. Divine revelation. What a revelation! Divine glory shone into idolatrous darkness. Abraham was thereby transformed. The worshipper of idols became the friend of God. The title "the God of Glory" used by Stephen as he described this event in the life of Abraham is found only one other time, and that in the Millennium Psalm, Psalm 29. As we think of Abraham's relation to the nation of Israel, we see in the use of this title how God, at the very beginning of the nation's history, anticipated its final glory. There is a similar title found in one of the other Millennium Psalms, Psalm 24, the King of Glory. Since we have mentioned that Abraham became the friend of God, let us consider this fact before we look further into the details of his life. Friendship with God. From the 3 times in the Bible that Abraham is called the friend of God, we'll learn something of the actual beginning of that friendship, and of the lengthy period through which its influence endured. According to James 2:21-24, friendship with God for this patriarch began that day when he believed God, and, obeying him, offered Isaac upon the altar. The twice that reference is made to this friendship in the Old Testament suggests that God never forgot it, nor did Abraham's descendants ever forget it. The Amorite came against Israel in battle in the days of King Jehoshaphat, so we read, Jehoshaphat feared and set himself to seek the Lord, 2 Chronicles 20:1-13, and in his prayer he said, Art not thou our God, who didst drive out the inhabitants of the land before thy people Israel, and gavest it to the seed of Abraham thy friend? Jehoshaphat pleaded with the Lord on the ground of God's friendship with Abraham. When Cyrus, the Persian, was devastating the other nations and building his mighty empire, God touched his heart to preserve Israel and to restore the temple at Jerusalem, Ezra 6:1-3. We find the secret why God so touched his heart. Thou Israel art my servant, Jacob whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham my friend, Isaiah 41:1-9. God could not forget the descendants of his friend. Friendship with God may wield an influence for good long after we have passed home from these scenes of time.